We're studying Tanya. There's actually a big introduction to the Tanya, which usually people learn it, but we're not going to learn the introduction. There's a reason for it. I found out that in the beginning it's too much for people. We might go back to it later on. Just the idea of what we're going to be learning, what is Tanya is all about. Think about Tanya, about a religious person, a chassid of the Alter Rebbe, who's been trying to lead the Jewish life for many, many, many years. He's 50, he's 60. He's trying to be a good boy all these years. And he notices, I don't know if I'm much better than I was 10 years ago. I don't know if I'm much better than I was 20 years ago or 30 years ago. So he goes into the Rebbe and he asks the Alter Rebbe advice. How can I become a better Jew? How can I become a better man? How can I become a better husband? How can I become a better friend? How can I be who I really am as a Jew, what God made me? That's the question that is going to be asked.
Good question.
And the Tanya is an answer. And the interesting thing about the Tanya, that it is an answer not for an individual person. It's an answer for every Jew. There is no Jew who did not ask these questions. Whether you asked it overtly or whether you ask it subconsciously. But you asked all the questions, all the problems that we're going to be discussed. Each and every problem is your individual problem. So when we go through the Tanya, we're going to be discussing all the things. A couple of general rules when we learn Tanya. Tanya is not a book where you just learn. You need to digest it. So after we learn whatever we learn, there's a week. There's a week in between. Think about what we've learned. There's not that much, by the way, to think about in the beginning. You will notice. But you have to internalize the learning. The more you internalize, the more you will have questions. The questions are going to be constantly. There's hundreds and thousands of levels. Yeah? But you're going to find the answers. All the answers are within the Tanya. The way we're going to do the Tanya is we're going to go through the entire thing, hopefully. We started with almost a million. Hopefully it's going to go to more. And we're going to not necessarily dwell on particulars. Just the overall concepts of what they are. That's what we're going to be discussing. When we go through the Tanya, you might have some ideas from Hasidus, especially if you've learned from me about it, about all kinds of concepts. But we're starting to read it as if we don't know anything. There's nothing we learned, there's nothing we know, we don't know about anything, we don't understand how it works, we don't understand what works. And as we go through the Tanya, we're going to find out. Remember, the more important than knowing the answer is understanding the questions. This is specifically within the Tanya. Don't try. I'm going to ask questions constantly. Don't try to answer my question. It's rhetorical questions. I'm asking it just for that you to think about it. Yeah? It's just for something to think about. Rhetorical question. I will give time in the end of class, after I close the thing, to ask questions. And there are going to be many questions. There are going to be many issues in the Tanya, which you're going to find might be even offensive. It's going to go against your logic. It's going to go against things. But don't be afraid to ask. Like I said, in the end of class, I will always give time for questions. But keep the questions for the end of the class. If you have a question, mark it, know where it is, and we're going to discuss it in the end of the class. If you do have questions, I will only discuss questions that pertains to the concept that we are dealing with. If it's a side issue, I will not discuss it because there's too much thing to cover. We're never going to get anywhere. And so let's start. Perek Aleph, this is imagine. This is a chassid coming into his Rebbe, and he knows something. He learned something throughout his life. He's a learned chassid. He's a rabbi. He's a big rabbi. The Tanya was written to religious people. And everyone, like I said, not just religious people, but also religious people. So it says like this. The person came to the Rebbe, and it says, Tanya, actually if you're going to look, Tanya means a brisa. A brisa means a Mishnah that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi did not compile. But it's a Mishnah. If you're going to look at the word Tanya, it doesn't say over there Tanya. It says Rabbi Ishmaelai. Yeah, there's a reason why the Alter Rebbe opened with Tanya. And again, like I said, we're not going to go deep. We're not going to ask these questions. Why did he open with Tanya if he didn't say it? Just that you know, Tanya is a certain klipa in Kabbalah. But again, we leave it for another time, another class, like they say. So the person learned. Where did he learn it? He learned Maseches Nida. He learned Gemara of Maseches Nida. And what did he learn in Maseches Nida? He learned like this. He learns that there was a neshama. A neshama, a soul. Before it comes down here to earth, God makes it, the soul, take an oath. And what's the oath that the soul has to do? So it says, Mashbi'im oto, God comes to the soul, or the court, heavenly court comes to the soul, and they make him take an oath. What is the oath they make the soul take? Tehi tzadik ve'al tihi rasha. Be righteous and don't be wicked. Already we are introduced to two concepts, which we will not discuss today. The concept of what a wicked person is, and the concept of what a righteous person is. We have no idea what a righteous person is, nor do we know what a wicked person is. But we do know that before the neshama came down to this earth, there was an oath that the neshama took. And the oath was, be righteous and don't be wicked. And then the oath continues. It says, be righteous, don't be evil. And then the oath continues. Before we continue with the oath, the chassid comes into the Rebbe, comes into Yechidus, and he says to the Rebbe, Rebbe, I want to be a righteous person. That's why I came down to this world. I really have a desire to be righteous. That's what I want to do. This is my ideal. This is where I want to get to. But the oath continues. Be righteous and don't be evil. And then it continues. Ve'afilu kol ha'olam kulo omrim lecha tzadik ata. You should know. You walked your entire life to be righteous. And the entire world agrees with the concept, you're righteous. Your wife thinks you're righteous. Your friends think you're righteous. Your rabbi thinks you're righteous. Everybody in the world thinks you're righteous. Heye be'enecha kerasha. You should look at yourself like you're wicked. Excuse me. Why? Why should I look? In other words, the person comes in front of the Alter Rebbe, he walks into the Alter Rebbe, and he comes to the Alter Rebbe and he says, Alter Rebbe, I achieved it. My wife thinks I'm righteous. See, the Rebbe thinks I'm righteous, that's one thing. My friend thinks I'm righteous, it's another thing. But my wife thinks I'm righteous? Yes, even my wife thinks I'm righteous. You know, so the Rebbe comes and tells him, no, you should think of yourself like evil. But it says, my wife is the proof. If she thinks I'm righteous, I must be righteous. But that's a proof.
You have to ask your ex-wife.
Or the ex-wife, that's right. Even the ex-wife thinks you're righteous. The only reason she divorced you is because she saw how righteous you are. She didn't want you to pain with her presence. That's how righteous you are. So over here, the Chassid says that's one aspect of Judaism. A person got to the level that he thinks is completely righteous, and over here we tell him, you should think of as wicked. Even though everybody else thinks you're righteous, including you should think yourself as wicked. And immediately, we're going to go to the other side now. וצריך להבין, hey, what's going on over here? This is one statement in Masechet Nida. But we need to understand there's another statement. דהתנן אבות פרק ב', that there's another statement in Ethics of the Father, the 2nd chapter. Over there it says, we all learn it every summer, it says it, ואל תהי רשע בפני עצמך. You should never think of yourself as wicked. So here we have already the first problem. One place in Torah tells you, even if you're righteous, you should think you're wicked. And another place in Torah says, you should never think yourself like you're wicked. And now, we're going to see which one makes more sense. So it looks like the one that makes more sense is the one that you shouldn't think of yourself as wicked. Because if a person thinks of himself as a wicked person, what's going to happen to him? If you think that you're wicked, you're going to become wicked. You're going to be expecting yourself to be wicked. Yeah, that makes sense, right? It's a fulfilling prophecy. But we have two places in the Torah that tells you to do the opposite things. וגם אם יהיה בעיניו כרשע, it says, let's look what will happen if we're going to do the first view. The first view is no matter how righteous you are, you should think yourself as wicked. So if a person thinks of himself as a wicked person, if he thinks himself, you know what, I'm a lowlife. This is who I am. I try to come close to God my entire life. I'm 50, 60 years old. Who knows how old I am? And I tried to become closer and closer. And I came to the conclusion that, it's not going well. Forgot God. I fight with the wife. I fight with the friends. I'm not nice to this guy. I get angry about this guy. I've got many blemishes. I'm a wicked person. It says, what's going to be so wrong if a person thinks of himself as wicked? So it says, אם יהיה בעיניו כרשע, if you really think that you're wicked, ירע לבבו, your heart will become saddened, will become bad. ויהיה עצב, and he will not have energy. A person, he will become depressed. I'm a wicked person. What's the use? I'm fighting, I'm anyway wicked. Nothing is going to change. And then what will happen? לא יוכל לעבוד השם בשמחה ובטוב לבב. A person who's depressed has no chance to improve. That's it. A person who thinks he's wicked is going to become depressed. He's going to become depressed when he fights throughout life. He doesn't have the energy to fight. A person who's depressed doesn't have energy to become a good Jew. That's why by Hasidim, it's a big madrega, it's a big level to always be happy. Happiness, even if you sinned, gives you energy. It gives you energy to fight against your own wickedness, your own evil inclination. Energy gives the wickedness. So here the guys say, you know what, I have a solution. This is going to be my solution. I'm going to be wicked, because this is who I am. I know my level. My level is that I'm a wicked person. I sin. I go against God. But I'm not going to become sad by it. I'm not going to become depressed. I'll still have energy. So I'll sin and celebrate at the same time. Maybe that's the solution. So the Alter Rebbe tells the person, you can't live in such a life. If you're not going to become depressed or a little bit sad from the fact that you're wicked, you know what's going to happen? You still are not going to be able to be a good Jew. Why you won't be able to be a good Jew? Because you're not going to care. A person who sins and he doesn't feel sad about his sins, he knows he's wicked, he's continuing in his wicked ways, and he doesn't care, he's not going to improve. He's going to just say, hey, I sinned here, I sinned there, big deal. That's not a way to improve in your life. That's not a way to become a better Jew. It's not going to happen. So we have these two questions. In one place it says, even if you're righteous, you have to think of yourself as wicked, and then it doesn't make sense, because if you think you're wicked, you cannot fight against the evil inclination, and you cannot improve in your being Jewishness. So whichever way you want to go in Judaism, both systems are going to fail. So let's continue. So in order to understand this, we're going to bring a couple more problems. Acha'inyan. So it says, in order to understand this, we need to understand levels of Jews. There's going to become levels of Jews over here. We're going to divide Jews. We find in the Gemara 5 levels. 5 distinct levels within Judaism. What's a distinct level? The first level is tzaddik vetovlo, a righteous person and good to him. Let's explain it in both ways quickly. It means he's righteous and he wins the lottery all the time. He's got a nice wife, nice children, everybody likes him, everything goes well. He's righteous and God is being kind to him and good to him. But we're not going to learn that way. Righteous and good to him, the way we're going to learn, it means that, what I just said. But it also means a deeper level. It means a righteous person that has good in him. Vetovlo, and good in him. That's the way we're going. He's righteous and he's good. Let's continue. Then there's another level, tzaddik veralo, a righteous person and bad to him. So the simple explanation, he's righteous and he's got a terrible wife and a terrible job and he's sick and he's miserable, but he's righteous. But we're not going to learn it that way. We're going to learn he's righteous and there's bad in him. Now you're going to ask me, Rabbi, doesn't make sense. If he's righteous, he doesn't have bad in him. But that's what it says. We'll figure it out later on. Right now I don't know why he says it. But there is such a level of a person who is righteous, and the Gemara says he's bad. He's righteous and bad. How does it work together? I have no idea. Righteous and good makes sense. Righteous and bad doesn't make sense. Okay, continue. Then we have Rasha vetovlo. We have wicked person and good to him. Simple explanation. He's wicked. He's Al Capone, but everything works fine. He's got a good wife. He gets honor from the people. Everybody loves him. He's got a good life. Yeah, but we're not going to learn it that way. We're going to learn he's wicked, and he has good in him. He's wicked and good. And then we have Rasha veralo. We have a wicked person and bad to him. He's wicked and life is being miserable also in life. Again, we're not going to learn it way. We're going to learn who's wicked and is bad in him. And then we're going to have the last one, who's a Beinoni. He's an intermediary, he's an in-between guy. And that Beinoni that we're just got to introduce to now is the entire book. The entire book was written for the Beinoni. The Alter Rebbe wrote a book also for tzaddikim. Yeah? We're not going to learn that one. We're going to learn this book. A book for the Beinoni. It looks like maybe we are the Benoni, but we don't even know what the Benoni is. So we continue and try to figure it out. So the continuation over here is just going to give us a quick explanation of all these five levels. Pirshu b'Gemara says this is not even Kabbalah. This is plain Gemara. So the Gemara explains Tzaddik v'tov lo, righteous person and good to him. You remember, we explained it as a righteous person that God gives him a nice wife and a nice job. You should know what he is. He's a tzaddik gamur. He's completely tzaddik. That just explains what the Gemara is trying to tell us over here. The Gemara is trying to tell you, look, this guy is completely righteous. What does it mean completely righteous? He's done everything that could be done. If he is 100%, he got 100 units to refine in himself, he refined 100% of himself. In other words, he has nothing to do else over here. He did everything he could. There's nothing else he could do, such a person. Because there's nothing else he could do, God doesn't need it to make him better. That's it, he's perfect. He's finished. Gamur. He's finished. He done his job. Because there's no need to refine him, to perfect him, because he is perfect, there's no need to give him trials and tribulations. He doesn't need to pass any trials and tribulation, because there's nothing to refine. He's already refined. That's why it happens to be that it's good to him. Because he's completely good, that's why life is good for him, because there's nothing else for him to do. That's the first explanation. Then he says, tzaddik veralo. What about a tzaddik and bad to him? Yeah, also bad he has life, bad in his life, it's bad to him. Is tzaddik she'eino gamur. He's a righteous person that did not perfect himself. In other words, he still has things to do. He's completely, I don't know what it means, but he's righteous.
So why call him righteous?
Oh, that's a very good question. Very good question. And we'll have to answer it. It's the same question as before. Why do you call him righteous? So he's righteous, but he's incomplete. So since he's incomplete, God needs to perfect him. How do you get perfected? By trials and tribulation. God puts in front of him trials and tribulation in order to perfect him. That trials and tribulation translates in the world that the world is bad to him. Life is hard. That's how it translates.
Would Yosef be?
No, I don't know, side issue. I don't know what. Levels of Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov are higher than Tzaddikim. They're called Merkava. Yosef is the fourth wheel of the Merkava, so therefore I'm not going to discuss him. It's not nothing to do with any levels in this book. Not even completely righteous.
He's doing bad things.
But he's not even on the levels of a complete righteous. He's somewhere else. He's above it. We're not going to discuss him at all over here. Tanya doesn't discuss Yosef. Yosef is the fourth wheel of the chariot. The tzaddik is down here in this world. Yosef is up there in the heavens. We don't know. We don't understand in Yosef's. Okay? Prophets, a prophet could be righteous. Two different things. Yeah, you can be a prophet and righteous. Usually, prophets are righteous, though. Yeah. Okay. So up to here is the way the Gemara learns it. Now we're going to start learning Kabbalah. So up to here we're introduced to the Gemara. This is the way the Gemara explained it. Now we're going to go even deeper. We're going to go according to the Kabbalah. Uberaya mehemna, there's a book called Haro'eh HaNe'eman, the faithful shepherd. Yeah? Parashat Mishpatim. In Parashat Mishmatim, Raya Mehemna, Zohar. It's a part of the Zohar. In Parashat Mishpatim, over there it's called Tzadik Veralo. You want to know, how can it be? Arya's question, what does it mean? This strange question. You told me in one side that he's righteous. On the other side, you told him that he has bad in him. So if he has bad in him, why are you calling him righteous? If he's righteous, how does he have bad in him? So he explains. Raya Mehemna says, I'm going to explain to you what the Gemara meant. I'm going to explain to you, how can he be righteous and bad at the same time? And he says, Tzaddik veralo, he is righteous and bad to him. So it says he does have bad, but hara shebo kafuf latov. The bad inside of him is subjugated to the good. It's not like he doesn't have bad. He has bad. The bad doesn't talk. The bad doesn't influence him. The bad is not involved, let's call it this way. We don't know which levels yet we're talking about. But he has bad, but the bad is not active, let's call it. It's not an active bad. Why? He's subjugated to the rule of the good. ובגמרא ספר סוף פרק ט' דברכות, and now we're going to go to another Gemara in the end of 9th chapter of Brachot. Over there it's going to give us even another viewpoint of these guys. Maybe we'll understand it a little bit better. Tzadikim yetzer tov shoftam. It says righteous people, it's the good inclination who governs them. The good inclination is the one that rules over them. Reshaim yetzer hara shoftan. Wicked people, it's the bad inclination that governs them. Beinonim, and the intermediary, the Beinoni, ze veze shoftam. Sometimes the good inclination governs them, sometimes the bad inclination governs them. So what do we get from here? Over here we get a Disney movie, so far. You've got a person, you've got the devil on one shoulder, you got the angel on another shoulder, and the was whispering in his hand. The tzaddik only listens to the angel, the wicked only listens to the devil, and the Beinoni sometimes listens to this, sometimes listens to this. This is what it, so far it looks like a Disney movie. Obviously it's not going to stay this way. It cannot be so simple, because otherwise we don't need this book. Okay.
I thought the Benoni hears the bad.
I don't know what the Benoni is. You've learned before, but we didn't learn before.
I think I know what it is.
Yeah.
I will say it.
Don't think that you do know.
Well,
Erase it. I know, but erase it for right now. When we get to introduce it, learn it then.
erase it.
Yeah, erase it, because otherwise it's going to confuse.
Gotcha.
It's going to confuse. Okay? And now we're going to get to introduce, after this whole conversation that was taking place, imagine now there's a sage. A sage is teaching his students. He's teaching them these Gemaras that we just explained. He's not teaching them the Zohar yet, because the Zohar doesn't exist. Yeah, maybe it does exist, but he's not allowed to teach them. So he might hint about the Zohar, but he's teaching this concept. So Rabbi right now is in Beit HaMidrash. He's got all these students, and they're learning exactly what we're learning. They have the same question that we're having. What are we talking about? Do we have such a creature? Is it a Disney movie? Is it that simple? That's what's going on over here? So Rabbi, the sage, the great sage, stands up in class. All the students looking up at him. The great Rabbi just stood up. He says, guys, all the students, after they're learning it, everything we learned, they say, Rabbi, we're confused. We don't know righteous, evil. Explain. What are you talking about? So he says, guys, don't worry, I'll explain to you. He stands up, he says, guys, look at me. I'm a Beinoni. You want an example? You want to understand what's going on over here? Look over here. I'm the example. Me looking at me, the Rabbi said, I'm a Beinoni. So Rabbi, and then he sits down. And he thinks, now they're not confused. Yeah? Amar lo Abaye. So his main student stands up. His main student stands up to Rabbi. He says, Amar lo Abaye. Abaye says to him, Lo shavikmar chai lechol bria. Rabbi, if you're a Beinoni, what does that mean? that means that the rest of us are what? Are wicked. Therefore, you didn't leave a drop of life to any other creature. You don't give us a chance. If you're a Benoni, we're all wicked. And wicked, what happens to wicked people? They all go somewhere. We're going to see where we're going. By the way, it's going to discuss where we're going later on. Yeah? We're going to discuss if it's good, if it's bad, if we want to go there. Maybe it's a good ticket. Yeah? So it says, you didn't leave a drop of life to anyone. If you're a Benoni, then we're all, that's it, we're all dead. So after this conversation, we're even more confused. Even Rabbi, with all these stories, what's a Benoni? Rabbi thinks he's a Benoni. Tzaddikim, what is going on over here? Tzaddik and bad, tzaddik and good. If he's a tzaddik, he's good. Why are you giving me all these things? Okay. So, להבין כל זה בהיטב. So now we're very confused. So to go out of this confusion, to understand this very, very good, we're going to bring another problem. וגם להבין מה שאמר איוב, we also need to understand what Eov says. See, in English is Job. What Job says. What did Job say? Job said something very controversial. What's so controversial about what he says? Job said, Ribono shel olam. Job says, Master of the universe, Barat tzadikim, Barat reshaim. Says, God, you created righteous people. God, you created wicked people. And immediately all the commentaries look at Job and says, this guy is an Apicorus. How do you say an Apicorus in English? He's an unbeliever. He goes against the Jewish faith. Why? והצדיק ורשע לא כאמר. We all know that God doesn't determine if you're righteous or if you're wicked. Who determines if you're righteous or you're wicked? You do. It's free choice. God gave us free choice to determine whether we're righteous, whether we're wicked. It's our choice. It's us. We determine it. There are things that God determines. Whether you'll be rich or poor, God determines. Where you're going to live, God determines. Who you're going to marry, God determines. First marriage anyway. Yeah? Yeah. But if you're going to be righteous or wicked, that's free choice. It's my choice. God tells you, choose life. God tells you, I give you free choice, you choose it. So how come Eov comes to God and says to God, it doesn't matter what the conversation is, but he says to God, God, you created righteous people, you created wicked people. In other words, it looks like he says, God, you can't blame the wicked people. That's the way you created them. How can you come to complain to them? It looks like Eov thinks this way. Yeah? And Eov, by the way, is a great philosopher. He knows what he's talking about. So what is Eov talking about? Everything becomes more and more complicated. The more we delve into the psyche of a human being, it becomes more and harder to understand what's going on over here. And then he's going to discuss. Now we're going to discuss this Benoni. He says, you think we understand what a Benoni is? He says, this Benoni that we're trying to understand, that creature that we're trying to understand, doesn't make sense. He says, you cannot be a Benoni. Right now he's going to go through 5, 6, 7 questions to show you that it's illogical to think that there's such a creature. It looks like it's logical to think that you're wicked or you're righteous. But in between, he says, it doesn't make sense, the in-between guy. What do you mean in-between guy? I'll give you an example. We're going to see it inside also. If a person sinned, what is he? Wicked. If he did tshuva, what is he? Righteous. So when is he Benoni? There's no time to be Benoni. It's either you're righteous or you're wicked. It's like electricity. Either the electricity flowing, you're connected to God. If you're not connected to God, you're wicked. That's it. It's 0 or 1. There's no other things in Judaism. There's no in between. So now he's going to start discuss. Maybe there is in between. Let's start. And he's going to try one thing, and he's going to try another thing, he's going to try another thing, and they're not going to work. So let's see. וגם להבין מהות מדרגת הבינוני. It says, I want to understand what is this level we call a בינוני. Who is this בינוני? What is the guy? שבוודאי אינו מחצה זכויות ומחצה עוונות. For sure this בינוני is not a person that sometimes sins and sometimes doesn't. So he says, maybe, why are you so sure? He says, why are you so sure that the Beinoni is not someone that sometimes sins, sometimes doesn't? Maybe it is. Because he says, it cannot be. Why cannot be? So I'll tell you why it cannot be. There was once a person called Rebbe. You remember Rebbe? We learned about him before. He says he's a Beinoni. And I'll tell you a story about this Rebbe. Rebbe was a righteous person who every second of the day did the commandment. And when he didn't do a commandment, he learned Torah. There's no such thing as living life and not doing commandment. And I'll tell you the story about this Rebbe. There was one time a disagreement between the angels and God in the high court. How can the angels disagree about God? Some other time, some other class. And there was a disagreement of what to do, what to understand. If an oven is kosher, an oven is not kosher. The oven is tameh, pure or impure. They couldn't come to a conclusion. So they both agreed, the heavenly court and God, they agreed to have a judge. To rule who's right. And they both agreed that the judge is going to be Rebbe. Says, we all trust him. He knows what's going on. Righteous person down here. He knows what's going on. So they sent the angel of death, because Rabbit is down here and they're up there. So they sent the angel of death. Hey, bring him up to us so we can ask him. Yeah. So the angel of death came down. Usually, it takes the angel of death a split second to take a person. Why? Because if a person doesn't do a mitzvah, that's the only way he can take him. So sometimes he needs to wait, a couple of minutes. Yeah. But there's another rule. If a person doesn't do a mitzvah with 100% energy, he can also take him. Yeah. So the angel of death is right over there, where Rabbi is, and he's trying to take him. He says, one mitzvah, another mitzvah. He's going to, not in every mitzvah he's going to have full energy. Some mitzvahs he likes more than others. Nothing goes. He's there for 5 minutes, for 10 minutes, for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. They're waiting up in heaven. God tells him, no, bring him. What's going on? So the angel doesn't have a choice. He says, look, this guy is all the time doing mitzvahs or learning Torah or doing sin. He calls up, he makes so that the Romans hear about him. The Romans, who was the Babylonians, yeah? Here is about Romans, whichever was at the time, you choose. The armies that were occupying the land of Israel at the time hear about him, that he was teaching Torah and he's doing something, talking against the kingship. So they're starting to run after him. So he says, oh, now he's not going to be able to do Torah and mitzvahs. I'll be able to get him. But he's running, and while he's running, he's not wasting time. He's going through Mishnahs, through Gemara, through something in his mind. He's having thoughts, And then he goes to some cave, and in the cave he can contemplate godliness all the time. He doesn't have problems at all. It's the Satan, the Malach HaMavet, he's thinking, it's even worse now. In the city there was a chance he's going to do something. Now he's by himself. He only thinks about God. In the end, he makes a sound of a baby crying, and he stops learning for 1 second, and that's how he's able to take him up. So it says, such a person as Rabbah, when he stood up in class, and he says, I am a Beinoni, he wasn't lying. He wasn't being humble. He actually was 100% sure that he's a Beinoni. Now, he knew that he doesn't sin half the day. He's not someone that sometimes listens to the evil inclination and sometimes doesn't. In truth, Rabbah was not a Beinoni, he was righteous. And we will have to understand later on, by the way, Later on, it's going to be explained to us. How did Rabbi actually think that he was a Beinoni? If he was righteous. But we did come up to the conclusion that a Beinoni cannot be somebody that half of his life sins. That cannot be a Beinoni. And that's what he says. שאם כן, because this is if so, איך טעה רבא בעצמו לומר שהוא בינוני? How did Rabba was mistaken in himself to think that he's a בינוני? ונודע, and we all know, דלא פסיק פומיה מגרסה, that his mouth didn't stop learning, עד שאפילו מלאך המוות לא היה יכול לשלוט בו, until the angel of death couldn't even control him. ואיך היה יכול לטעול במחצה עוונות חס ושלום? So how can you say about Rava that a Beinoni, that he was somebody that was half and half sinner and half good guy? Sometimes they do commandments and sometimes they sin. Maybe that's a Beinoni. That for sure cannot be a Beinoni. We know that from Rabbah, because Rabbah actually did think that he's a Beinoni. So from here, we do learn one thing about the Beinoni. We don't learn what a Beinoni is. We have no idea what a Beinoni is, but I can tell you what a Beinoni is not. A Beinoni is not somebody who sins half the time. That I know. It's not 50-50. I don't know what he is right now. We don't know what a Beinoni is. But I do know that a Beinoni is not sometimes that's half and half. That sometimes he sins and sometimes he doesn't. That's not a Beinoni.
Is that the oath that the soul agreed to be a Beinoni?
No? The oath, be righteous and don't be wicked.
Okay, gotcha.
That's the oath.
Gotcha.
Be righteous and don't be wicked.